I still remember that night as if it happened yesterday. The air was heavy, still, almost too still, like the world was holding its breath before something broke. The street outside my window glistened under the streetlights, rain falling in slow, tired drops that echoed against the pavement. It was one of those nights when silence feels louder than sound. You can feel it, in your chest, in your stomach, in the back of your throat. And deep down, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what. My phone buzzed once on the table. Then again. Each vibration made my heart race a little faster. It wasn't unusual for him to be late. He always said work ran over, or traffic was bad, or his phone died. But that night, every excuse I'd ever accepted suddenly felt like a lie replaying itself in my mind. I walked to the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. Our apartment was quiet, too quiet. The dinner I'd made hours ago had gone cold on the table. The candles I'd lit had melted into crooked puddles of wax. And my reflection in the window looked like a stranger, someone waiting for answers that might never come. It had been months since I started feeling this way. The distance between us had grown so slowly, I almost didn't notice it at first. A missed call here, a forgotten promise there. The laughter that used to fill our evenings had been replaced by short replies and fake smiles. But I kept telling myself he loves me. He wouldn't do anything to hurt me. I wanted to believe that so badly that I ignored every sign staring me in the face. The third buzz of my phone pulled me out of my thoughts. This time it wasn't a message, it was a notification. A photo, tagged by someone I didn't recognize. I shouldn't have opened it, but something in me, that quiet voice I'd been silencing for months, whispered, "Look." And so I did. The moment the picture loaded, my stomach dropped. It was him, smiling, but not with me. Her hand rested on his shoulder, her head tilted just slightly toward his. It wasn't the kind of photo that could be explained away. No group of friends, no casual setting. It was intimate, personal. And in that frozen moment, staring at my screen, I felt my world tilt on its axis. I didn't cry, not yet. Shock has a strange way of numbing you before it breaks you. I just stood there, motionless, my mind scrambling to find an explanation. Maybe it was old, maybe it was a misunderstanding. But deep down I knew. Every small doubt, every uneasy feeling, every lie I had swallowed, it all made sense now. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Each second felt like a countdown to the truth. I stared at the door, half expecting it to open, half wishing it wouldn't. I didn't know what I'd say if he walked in. Would I scream? Would I pretend I hadn't seen? Would I finally ask the questions I'd been too afraid to voice? A car pulled into the driveway below. Headlights flashed briefly across the curtains. My heart skipped a beat. I knew that sound. He was home. I stepped back, wiping at my face even though there were no tears yet. The front door creaked open. I heard his voice, calm, casual, like nothing had changed. Like the world hadn't just shifted under my feet. "Hey, sorry I'm late," he said from the hallway. "Traffic. Always traffic." His tone was familiar, almost comforting, and that made it worse. Because I realized in that moment, I didn't know this person anymore, not the way I thought I did. He walked in, set down his keys and smiled, that same easy smile that once made me feel safe. Now it just made me sick. He kissed my forehead like he always did, but I didn't move. I couldn't. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing the stiffness in my body. I wanted to say something. Show him the photo, demand the truth, scream at him for every lie he'd ever told me. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just nodded, because somehow, silence felt more powerful than anything I could have said. We sat down at the table in the quiet hum of our apartment. He started eating, making small talk about his long day. I watched him carefully. Every gesture, every smile, every pause, and it felt like watching a stranger play a role in my life. I kept replaying the photo in my mind, over and over, every second burning deeper. The way he looked at her, the way he once looked at me. He didn't notice my silence. Or maybe he did and just didn't care. Either way, I realized something then. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about choice. He had chosen to lie. And now it was my turn to choose what I'd do next. The rain outside grew heavier. Thunder rolled softly in the distance, like the world itself was warning me of the storm to come. I stood up, quietly taking his empty plate to the sink. He looked up, smiled, and thanked me. His voice sounded so normal, so calm. It made my skin crawl. That's when it hit me. He truly believed I didn't know. He thought his secret was safe, and that small realization changed everything. Because in that moment, under the dim light of our kitchen, I made a promise to myself, a silent one. I wouldn't confront him tonight, not yet. He wouldn't even see it coming, I'd pretend. I'd smile. I'd let him think he was still in control. But the truth? That night, I stopped being the person he could hurt. That night, something inside me shifted. Something quiet but unstoppable. And as I watched him laugh about his busy day, I knew. This was the beginning of the end. The night everything changed. If only I knew what was coming next. It's strange how love can start so quietly. One small moment that feels ordinary at the time, but later becomes the memory that rewrites your whole life. For me, it began on a rainy afternoon at the old cafe near the corner of Rosewood Street. I remember sitting by the window, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. The city outside was rushing by, umbrellas bumping into each other, cars splashing through puddles, the kind of chaos that always made me feel small. And then, he walked in. Daniel. He wasn't the kind of man who turned heads right away. Not flashy, not loud, but there was something about him. Calm, steady, grounded. He had that kind of smile that made you believe you were safe just by being near him. I didn't know it then, but that smile would become both my comfort and my curse. He ordered a coffee, noticed there were no empty seats, and asked if he could sit across from me. I nodded, pretending to be indifferent, though something inside me stirred. We talked, at first about small things, meaningless things. The weather, the noise, how the cafe smelled like burnt toast and cinnamon. But somehow the conversation stretched, and before I knew it, 2 hours had passed. He was charming in a quiet way. Not with grand gestures, but with attention. He listened, really listened, as if every word I said mattered. When he laughed, it wasn't loud. It was genuine. And when he looked at me, it felt like he saw right through the walls I didn't even know I had built. That was how it started. With laughter over cold coffee and shared stories under flickering cafe lights. From that day on, Daniel became a constant in my life. We texted, met again, and soon every weekend was spent together. He'd show up at my office with takeout when I worked late. He'd leave little notes in my bag, tiny reminders that someone out there was thinking of me. For the first time in years, I felt seen. I wasn't the kind of woman who believed in fairy tales. I'd always been practical, focused on work, on stability, on staying safe. But Daniel, he made me believe that maybe love didn't have to hurt. Maybe trust wasn't just a word. Our world grew around us, slow and steady. Sunday breakfasts, movie nights, walks along the pier where he'd hold my hand and talk about our future like it was already written. And when he moved into my apartment, it felt natural, seamless, like he'd always belonged there. He'd bring me coffee every morning before I woke up, kiss my forehead and whisper, "You're my everything." I used to smile when he said that. Back then, I didn't realize how dangerous those words could be. The first few months were perfect. Or at least, they seemed that way. But life has a funny way of hiding cracks behind the shine. At first, they were small, tiny things I brushed off as nothing. A change in his tone when I asked simple questions. A hesitation when he mentioned work. A few late nights that turned into weeks. He said he was working on a big project. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Trust, once built, makes you blind to everything else. I still remember one evening. We were having dinner, laughing about something trivial. His phone buzzed. He reached for it quickly, face tightening for just a second before he smiled and turned it face down. I asked, "Who was that?" He shrugged, still smiling. "Just work. You know how it is." And I did. At least, I thought I did. But something about that moment stuck with me. The way he looked at the screen. the slight shake in his hand. Small details, easily forgotten if you want to forget them. And I did want to forget. Because the truth is, it's easier to live in peace than to chase suspicion. The next few weeks blurred into routine. He'd wake up early, leave before I did, and come home late. Always tired, always distracted. I told myself he was just stressed. We all go through phases, right? One night, I made his favorite dinner. Pasta with too much garlic and a bottle of cheap red wine. I lit candles, dimmed the lights, and waited. Hours passed. By the time he walked in, the candles had melted into small pools, and my heart had too. "Sorry, babe," he said, dropping his jacket on the couch. "Things ran over. Big presentation tomorrow." I smiled. "You could have texted." He kissed my cheek, murmured something about dead batteries and bad signal. And I let it go, because love sometimes is a series of small compromises that slowly eat you alive. Then came the trip. A work retreat, he said, a weekend away with his team. He packed lightly, promised to call. The morning he left, he hugged me tight and said, "Don't miss me too much." I laughed, pretending to be fine. But as I watched him drive away, a strange chill ran through me, like part of me already knew something wasn't right. That night, I couldn't sleep. The apartment felt colder, emptier. I found myself checking my phone every few minutes, waiting for his text, his call, anything. He finally messaged around midnight. "Just got in, exhausted. Talk tomorrow?" Short, distant, but I convinced myself it was nothing. The next day, I saw a post online. Someone from his company had shared photos from the retreat. I scrolled through them casually until I saw him, laughing, happy, and beside him, a woman I'd never seen before. Her hand brushed his arm in a way that felt familiar. My stomach tightened, but I told myself in its work, don't overthink. Little did I know, that was the beginning of the unraveling. Weeks passed. Life went back to normal, but something had shifted between us. He became careful, too careful. Passwords on his phone, a second phone charger hidden in his bag. I noticed, of course, but I said nothing. It's strange how you can feel your heart breaking in slow motion and still smile through it. I told myself it was just stress, that we'd get through it, that love was stronger than doubt. But love can't survive where trust is dying, and I could feel ours slipping away, piece by piece. Looking back, I can see all the signs so clearly now. But back then, I was blinded by hope. The kind of hope that convinces you everything's fine, as long as you don't ask too many questions. I remember one night lying beside him, listening to his breathing as he slept. The city lights filtered through the curtains, and I thought about how peaceful he looked. I wanted to believe that peace meant honesty, that calm meant loyalty. I was wrong, because beneath that calm exterior, secrets were already growing, spreading quietly, like cracks under glass. And the saddest part? Even then, I would have forgiven him for almost anything, because when you love someone deeply, you don't imagine betrayal. You imagine forever. The next morning, he kissed me goodbye and said, "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." I smiled, not knowing that in just a few weeks, those same words would echo in my mind like a cruel joke. I watched him walk out the door, confident, composed, with that same gentle smile that had once made me feel safe. But this time, something about it felt different. Colder, practiced. And as I stood there, the morning sun streaming through the window, I felt a quiet unease, a whisper that something was slipping away, even if I couldn't see it yet. That was how it all began, not with a fight or a lie, but with love that felt too perfect to question. If only I had known. Perfection always hides something. It started with little things, tiny, insignificant moments that didn't seem worth mentioning, until they all began to add up. Daniel had always been predictable, in a comforting way. His morning routine was the same. Coffee at 7, quick shower, out the door by 8. He used to kiss me before leaving, whispering a soft, "See you tonight." But lately even that had changed. The kisses grew shorter, distracted, and sometimes they didn't come at all. At first, I told myself he was just busy. Everyone goes through stressful phases, long hours, demanding deadlines. I wanted to believe that, because believing anything else meant admitting that something precious was slipping through my fingers. But love isn't blind. It just chooses what not to see. One evening, I noticed him sitting on the couch, his phone angled away from me. He was smiling, that subtle, private smile I hadn't seen in weeks. It was the kind of smile that used to be mine. When he realized I was watching, he quickly locked the screen and laughed awkwardly. "Work message," he said. "Nothing interesting." But his tone was too quick, too defensive. I brushed it off with a smile, but my chest tightened, a small quiet ache that told me something was off. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of the city outside our window. He lay beside me, phone still glowing faintly in his hand. Every few minutes, I saw the screen light up again. A message, another reply. His face turned away from me, the faint smile returning, and my stomach twisted. I turned on my side and whispered, "Who are you talking to?" He froze. Then, without even looking at me, he muttered, "Just a friend from work. Go back to sleep, a friend." That word echoed in my head long after he fell asleep. The next morning, I decided to test something small. While he showered, I reached for his phone, not to invade his privacy, but to quiet my thoughts. It was locked. It had never been locked before. That was the moment my heart dropped, because people don't build walls unless they have something to hide. I placed the phone back exactly as I found it and sat at the kitchen counter, waiting for him to come out. He smiled, poured himself coffee, and kissed the top of my head. Like nothing had changed. Like I hadn't just discovered a secret sitting right there between us. Days turned into weeks, and the distance grew. He stopped asking about my day. He started staying later at work. The warmth in his voice faded into something colder, almost polite. But I wasn't ready to confront him yet. I needed to be sure, to know before I accused him. Because the worst feeling in the world isn't betrayal. It's being made to feel crazy for suspecting it. One Friday evening, he called to say he'd be late again. "A client dinner," he said. His voice was calm, practiced, not a single hesitation. But something didn't sit right with me. I decided to surprise him. I dressed quickly, grabbed my keys, and drove toward his office. It wasn't far, just across town. My hands trembled on the steering wheel the entire way. Part of me hoped I'd find him exactly where he said he'd be. That I was wrong. That my trust hadn't been misplaced. But deep down, I already knew. When I arrived, the office lights were off. The parking lot was empty except for one familiar car, his. I parked a few spaces away, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. For a moment, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. Then I saw it, a shadow in the front window. 2 figures. One of them was him. The other, I couldn't see clearly. They were standing close, too close, and then laughter. Soft, intimate, a sound that once belonged to me. I felt frozen. My body refused to move, even as my mind screamed to look away. I watched for what felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than a few minutes. When the lights flicked off completely, I finally started my car and drove home, slowly, silently, tears blurring the road ahead. I didn't need to see more. Sometimes not seeing is enough to know. The next morning, he acted normal, too normal. He walked into the kitchen, humming, kissed my cheek, and asked about breakfast. I stared at him, wondering how he could lie so easily, how his face could look so calm while my heart was tearing itself apart inside. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the truth at him and watch his mask crack. But I didn't, not yet. Because anger fades, but revenge needs patience. Over the next few days, I started watching more closely. Patterns emerged, subtle ones, but enough to tell a story. He'd step outside to take calls. His laughter was softer, almost nervous. He'd check his reflection before leaving, more often than before. And one night, while folding laundry, I found a small perfume sample in his jacket pocket. It wasn't mine. The scent was different, floral, sweet, unfamiliar. I held it for a long time, my mind spinning, my heart pounding. That tiny bottle told me more than any confession ever could. Still, I didn't confront him. Not because I was weak, but because I needed to understand why. Why would he throw away everything we'd built? Why wasn't I enough anymore? Then came the moment that shattered whatever faith I had left. It was late, past midnight. I woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing again and again. He was asleep beside me, breathing evenly, the faint light of the screen flickering against his face. I hesitated for a second, then reached over and turned it toward me. The notification preview was short, but it said everything. A name I didn't recognize, and the words, "I can't stop thinking about you tonight." My hands went cold. My vision blurred. I stared at the message until the screen went dark again. In that instant, every lie, every excuse, every late night clicked into place. The truth was staring at me, cruel, undeniable, final. I put the phone back where it was, quietly, carefully, as if touching it too long might burn me. Then I got out of bed and walked to the living room. The rain outside had started again, tapping softly against the windows. It was the same sound from the night everything changed, steady, relentless, impossible to ignore. I sat there for hours, waiting for him to wake up, watching the sky lighten through the curtains. When he finally walked in, yawning, he smiled like nothing had happened. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. I looked at him, really looked, and something inside me broke quietly. Not with a scream, not with tears, just silence, the kind of silence that comes when your heart finally gives up on being surprised. That morning, I decided I wouldn't cry anymore. I wouldn't beg for answers or fight for explanations he'd never give, because I didn't need to hear him admit it. I'd already seen enough, but he didn't know that. And that was my advantage. He thought the secret was safe. He thought I was still the same woman who'd trust his every word. But I wasn't. Something in me shifted that day, quiet but permanent. The part of me that once believed in him died, and in its place grew something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous. Clarity. That night, he fell asleep next to me again, completely unaware. I watched him breathe, his arm resting lazily over mine as if nothing was wrong. He had no idea that the woman lying beside him wasn't the same one who had once loved him blindly, because love was gone now. And what replaced it was purpose. My hands didn't tremble anymore. My heart didn't race. There was only focus. I had found the truth. Now, it was time to decide what to do with it. And as the rain kept falling outside, steady and cold, I whispered to myself, "This isn't over." Not even close. The truth doesn't arrive like thunder. It comes quietly, like a whisper you can't unhear, like a shadow that won't go away once you've noticed it. For days after that night, I walked through my life like a ghost. Every smile, every word Daniel said felt hollow, rehearsed. He still hugged me, still called me love, but I could feel the distance, 1,000 miles hidden behind a single kiss. I kept telling myself I needed proof. Because part of me still hoped I was wrong, that maybe that message was a misunderstanding. Maybe, "I can't stop thinking about you" meant something innocent. But deep down, I already knew it didn't. The missing piece, one Sunday morning, he said he was going out for groceries. I watched him leave, his jacket neatly pressed, his cologne too strong for a simple store run. Something told me to follow. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was survival. I waited a few minutes, then took my car and drove after him, keeping my distance. My hands were trembling, my heart racing in that sickening rhythm of dread and denial. He didn't drive toward the supermarket. He turned left, toward the old Riverside Cafe, the one we used to visit when we first started dating. That place used to mean something to us. Now, it was about to mean something entirely different. I parked across the street and watched. He got out of the car, looked around, and then she appeared. A woman I'd never seen before. She walked up to him with a smile that looked too familiar. Gentle, knowing, private. He reached for her hand, and when she leaned in to hug him, his arms didn't hesitate. That moment, that single, impossible moment, shattered everything. It was like watching my own reflection break into 1,000 pieces. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, frozen, as if my mind couldn't catch up with what my eyes were seeing. I'd imagined this scene 100 times, but imagination never hurts this much. Seeing it, feeling it, is something else entirely. The breaking point, I don't know how long I sat there. The world around me blurred, cars passing, people laughing, life moving on, while my own world stood completely still. My breath came shallow, my chest tight, as if the air itself didn't want to stay inside me. Then I saw something that pushed me past the edge. He handed her a small wrapped box, a gift. She laughed, covering her mouth, glowing in the way I hadn't seen him make me glow in months. And in that moment, it hit me. He wasn't just cheating. He was happy, not guilty, not conflicted, happy. That realization hurt more than the act itself. Because I could have forgiven a mistake, but joy? Joy with someone else? That was unforgivable. I drove home in silence. The entire way, I replayed every conversation, every late night, every excuse, every I'm just tired, every it's just work. They all made sense now. Cruel, perfect sense, when he returned that evening. I was sitting in the living room, lights dimmed, the same calm rain tapping against the windows. He walked in like nothing had happened, grocery bag in hand, humming softly. "Hey," he said. "You okay?" I nodded slowly, watching him, my voice steady. "Did you get everything you needed?" He smiled, that fake practiced smile. "Yeah, just the basics." He didn't notice the trembling in my hands, or maybe he pretended not to, and that's when I said it. Softly, almost too softly. "Who is she, Daniel?" His entire body froze. For a split second, I saw the truth flicker in his eyes before he masked it with confusion. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward, my voice still calm. "The woman at the cafe. The one you were holding this morning." He blinked, his lips parting, searching for a lie that might still save him. "But there was none left. Were you following me?" he finally asked, his tone sharp, defensive. That was the moment I knew. The guilty never ask why. They ask how. The confrontation. I stood up slowly, the air between us thick with unspoken things. "I didn't have to follow you, Daniel. You left a trail months ago." He rubbed his temples, muttering something under his breath, then looked at me with a sigh. "It's not what you think," I almost laughed. Those words, they're always the same. Every story of betrayal starts with that one useless sentence. I stepped closer, my voice trembling but controlled. "Then tell me what it is. Tell me why she gets your smiles now. Why she gets your time. Why you look at her the way you used to look at me." He didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, silent. And in that silence, I found my answer. "You could have told me," I said, my voice breaking. "You could have just said it was over. You didn't have to make me feel crazy. Didn't have to make me doubt my own heart." His shoulders slumped. "I didn't mean to hurt you." That line, that weak, empty apology, was the final crack in my heart. Because if you didn't mean to hurt me, you wouldn't have. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not when he didn't deserve to see my pain, the collapse. He tried to step closer, but I moved back. "Don't," I said quietly. "Just don't." The rain outside grew heavier, as if the sky itself was breaking with me. "Who is she?" I asked again, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. He hesitated, then whispered. "Her name is Claire. She works at my firm, Claire." A simple, harmless name, and yet, in that moment, it became the sharpest sound I'd ever heard. "How long?" I asked. He swallowed hard. A few months. Just 3 words. But they carried the weight of every lie he'd told me since. I nodded slowly, breathing through the ache. "So all those late nights, all those messages, they were her." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence was louder than any confession. Something inside me finally broke. I turned away, pressing a hand to my chest as if I could hold my heart together through sheer force. For the first time in years, I didn't recognize my own home. Every photograph, every memory, they all felt fake now, like props in a play that had ended long ago. I could hear him saying my name, softly, desperately. But his voice no longer reached me. It was just noise, a stranger's voice in a house I no longer belonged to. I walked to the window and looked outside. The rain had blurred the city lights into streaks of color, like a painting smudged by sorrow. Behind me, I heard him say, "I still love you." That was the cruelest part. Because people think love excuses betrayal, but real love doesn't destroy what it claims to care for. I turned to him, my face calm, my voice steady. "No, Daniel, you love the way I made you feel. You don't love me anymore." He didn't reply. He just stood there, silent, defeated, small. And for the first time, I saw him not as the man I loved, but as the man who chose to lose me. I walked past him, my steps slow, deliberate, each one heavier than the last. When I reached the bedroom door, I paused and said, "You took something from me I can never get back. Trust." He opened his mouth, but I didn't wait to hear it. I closed the door behind me, leaned against it, and finally, I let myself cry. Not the quiet, graceful kind of crying, but the kind that comes from somewhere deep, raw, uncontrollable, the kind that empties you completely. My knees gave way, and I slid down to the floor, my body shaking, my heart burning with every memory, every lie, every moment I thought was real. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, echoing through the walls like a cruel reminder that storms don't ask for permission. They just arrive. And as the rain poured harder, I whispered through my tears. I didn't want to see the truth, but it saw me anyway. Then I closed my eyes, and the world fell into silence. There's a moment after heartbreak, a quiet one, when the tears finally stop. It's not peace, not yet. It's emptiness, a stillness that feels like standing in the wreckage of your own life, surrounded by pieces you don't recognize anymore. That's where I was. For days, I barely spoke. I didn't eat much, didn't sleep. I just existed. The house felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by memories. His jacket still hung by the door. His mug still sat in the sink, as if time refused to accept what had happened. Every corner whispered his name. Every silence reminded me of what I'd lost. But grief is strange. It breaks you, and then somehow it sharpens you. One night, as I sat on the couch staring at nothing, I felt something shift. It wasn't anger exactly. It was clarity. A voice inside me said, "You've cried enough. Now get up." And I did. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes swollen, but behind them, something fierce had awakened. A new version of me, one that didn't beg, didn't plead, didn't need his explanations anymore. That day, I packed his things into boxes. Every shirt, every tie, every reminder. It wasn't about moving on yet. It was about reclaiming space. My space. I cleaned the house like I was scrubbing away the past. Every sweep of the broom, every drawer I emptied, felt like erasing his fingerprints from my life. When I was done, I stood in the middle of the living room, quiet, exhausted, but lighter. For the first time in weeks, I took a deep breath that didn't hurt. That's when I decided this wouldn't be the end of my story. No. This was just the beginning. The idea I didn't want revenge in the loud, messy way people imagine it. I didn't want to scream or break things or expose him publicly. No. That would have made me look like the villain in his story. I wanted something smarter. Something poetic. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he'd done. Not through anger, but through realization. He had taken away my dignity, my trust, my peace. So I was going to take away the one thing he valued most, his image. Daniel wasn't just a man, he was a performer. At work, at parties, on social media, he loved being seen as the perfect guy, the loyal boyfriend. The charming gentleman, the one everyone admired. I was going to make that image crumble, not by shouting the truth, but by letting him expose himself. gathering the pieces I started quietly. First, I went through our old texts, emails, and photos. I wasn't looking for dirt. I was looking for patterns. For proof of the man he pretended to be. He always said he was working late, yet there were nights his GPS showed him nowhere near his office. He claimed he was helping a friend move, but I found credit card charges from restaurants I'd never been to. Piece by piece, I built a timeline, a puzzle of lies that finally made sense. Then, I began to watch. Not obsessively, just patiently. I followed his social media posts, his stories, the small details he overlooked. Every photo, every comment told me something. He was careful, but not careful enough. People always slip when they think they've gotten away with something. And soon, I found my opportunity. The discovery one afternoon, a mutual friend named Laura invited me for coffee. She didn't know about the breakup. Daniel had been telling people we were taking a break. I smiled, pretending I was fine. But then she mentioned something interesting. She'd seen Daniel at a client event with a woman, the same one from the cafe. He introduced her as a close colleague. That's when I realized he wasn't hiding her anymore. He was easing her into the life we used to share. That's when my plan fully formed. I didn't want to confront him again. I wanted him to reveal himself, in front of everyone who once believed in him. The setup I started with subtlety. On social media, I began posting photos, not of sadness, not of heartbreak, but of transformation. New hair, new clothes, new confidence, smiling with friends, volunteering, laughing again. Every post had a message beneath the surface. I survived, and Daniel noticed. He started liking my pictures again, sending late-night texts like, "You look great." Typical. People like him always come back when they see you're doing better without them. I didn't reply. Not once, because silence was part of the plan. The more silent I was, the louder his curiosity became. The return. A few weeks later, I got an invitation, his company's annual charity gala. He probably didn't expect me to attend, but I did. That night, I wore a sleek black dress, simple yet powerful, the kind that made people look twice. When I entered the hall, every head turned. And when Daniel saw me, he froze. His date, Claire, was right beside him, smiling awkwardly. The same woman who once hid in cafes now stood proudly at his side. Perfect. I greeted them both with calm politeness, as if nothing had ever happened. "Good evening, Daniel," I said with a small smile. His voice caught. "I didn't expect to see you." "Oh, I wouldn't miss it," I replied softly. And that was true. I was there for a reason. The plan in motion. The gala was filled with executives, clients, and reporters. Everyone knew Daniel as a respectable, kind professional. But that night, I was going to remind them that images can be deceiving. I didn't expose him directly. That would have been too easy. Instead, I talked, casually, innocently, to the right people. I mentioned how Daniel and I had mutually decided to end things after he found someone who better suited his ambitions. I never said anything cruel. I didn't have to, because the truth, when hinted at delicately, spreads faster than any accusation. People started connecting the dots themselves, his colleagues whispered. His boss raised an eyebrow. And Claire, poor Claire, began to sense that she was part of a story much bigger than she realized. By the end of the night, Daniel looked tense. The attention he loved so much had turned uncomfortable. Every handshake felt forced, every smile brittle, and I just watched, calm, composed, untouchable, reclaiming power. After the event, he tried to call me. I ignored it. Then came the messages. "Can we talk? I think we need closure. I made a mistake. Closure. That word used to break me. Now, it only made me smile. Because closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you give yourself. And I already had mine. Still, I replied once, just once, with a single line. "Thank you for the lesson." He didn't respond after that. The shift weeks passed. I kept moving forward, started a new project at work, met new people, rebuilt my confidence piece by piece. The pain faded, replaced by something stronger. Peace. Then one day, I heard from Laura again. Apparently, Daniel's perfect relationship with Claire had started to crumble. She'd found out about other lies, other women. History was repeating itself, only now I was watching from a distance, untouched. It was strange. I didn't feel joy, not really. What I felt was justice. Quiet, poetic justice. Because sometimes life has its own way of delivering payback. All you have to do is get out of the way and let it happen. The new me I realized something powerful in all of this. Revenge doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes it means rebuilding yourself so beautifully that the person who hurt you can't stand to see you shine. And that's exactly what I did. I wasn't the same woman who once cried on the floor, begging for answers. I was stronger, wiser, free. Every scar had turned into armor. Every tear had watered a seed of strength inside me. And now, when I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see pain anymore. I saw power. One evening, as the sun set outside my window, painting the sky in shades of gold and fire, I smiled to myself. I had survived the worst and come out radiant. And somewhere out there, Daniel was probably wondering how everything slipped from his hands. He would never know the truth, that his downfall had begun the moment he underestimated me. Because sometimes, revenge isn't about shouting, it's about silence that echoes. It's about letting someone drown in the consequences of their own choices. And as I watched the city lights flicker to life below, I whispered to myself, not with anger, but with calm certainty. He had no idea what was coming. Time has a strange way of delivering justice. You wait, you heal, you rebuild, and then one day, without warning, the moment you've been preparing for finally arrives. For months, I lived my life in peace. I worked, I smiled, I slept through the night again. Daniel became a name, not a wound. But even as I moved forward, I could feel something unfinished. A thread that still connected us, loose and waiting to be pulled. And then, that day came. The invitation, it started with an email. Subject, panel invitation, Women in Leadership Summit. It was from Daniel's company. They were hosting a public event, a conference about ethics, leadership, and integrity in the workplace. And guess who was listed as the keynote speaker? Daniel Carter. I almost laughed. Integrity. Of all topics. I reread the invitation 3 times, just to be sure it was real. The irony was perfect, poetic even. He had built his career on a reputation of honesty, empathy, and trust. And now he was about to stand on a stage and preach it to hundreds of people. That's when I knew. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The setup in. The weeks leading up to the summit, I worked quietly. No anger, no impulsive moves, just calm precision. I still had everything. The texts, the emails, the receipts. I had his voice messages where he'd lied about his late meetings. I even had screenshots of his chats with Claire, where he promised her the same forever he once promised me. I didn't want to destroy his career. I wanted to destroy the illusion of perfection he hid behind. He had built his power on lies, and I was going to let those lies crumble in front of him. I reached out to Laura, the same mutual friend who had seen everything unravel months ago. She was part of the summit's organizing team. I didn't tell her everything. I didn't have to, just that I wanted to attend, quietly, as a guest. Of course, she said, smiling. It'll be good to see you. If only she knew how good. The big day. The morning of the summit, I dressed carefully. Simple, elegant, confident. A white blazer, dark jeans, hair pulled back, calm power. As I entered the venue, the air buzzed with energy. Hundreds of people mingled, executives, journalists, cameras flashing. At the center of it all stood Daniel, smiling, shaking hands, pretending to be the man he wanted everyone to believe he was. He didn't see me. Not yet. I took a seat near the front, close enough to watch every flicker of emotion on his face. The lights dimmed, the host spoke, and finally, it was his turn. The speech. He walked onto the stage with confidence, holding a wireless mic. Thank you, he began, his voice smooth, practiced. It's an honor to speak today about leadership, trust, and integrity, the pillars that define who we are. I almost choked on my water. The hypocrisy was almost cinematic. He spoke about loyalty, about honesty, about how success means nothing without moral character. Every word he said echoed against the lies he had told me. The nights he came home smelling of someone else's perfume. The mornings he smiled as if nothing had happened. The audience nodded, impressed. They didn't know the real story, but they were about to. The twist halfway through his speech, the host paused him for a Q&A session. Audience members could submit questions anonymously through an app connected to the big screen behind him. I waited. Then, I typed one. How do you define integrity in personal relationships, Mr. Carter? Would you say honesty applies both at work and at home? I pressed send. Seconds later, my question appeared on the giant screen behind him, glowing, bold, impossible to ignore. The room fell silent. Daniel blinked, caught off guard. He glanced at the screen, then at the audience, forcing a smile. Well, that's a good question, he stammered. He tried to laugh it off, but the tension in the room was palpable. I sat still, eyes fixed on him, calm and unreadable. Then another question popped up. Not from me this time. Is it true you dated a colleague while still in a relationship? Rumors say so. A murmur rippled through the audience. He froze. His confident mask began to crack. Someone else whispered near me, Wait, isn't that his ex in the second row? Heads began to turn. And for the first time since I'd known him, Daniel looked genuinely afraid. The unraveling, he tried to recover. I'm not sure where these rumors come from, he said, his voice tightening. I think people often misunderstand private matters, but it was too late. The air had shifted. The host looked uncomfortable, the audience restless. Questions kept flooding the screen, about professionalism, ethics, favoritism. It was like watching a dam break, and I didn't have to say a word. He had built the perfect image of himself, and now it was collapsing under its own weight. I could see it in his eyes, that desperate calculation, searching for a way out, a lie that would save him, but this time there wasn't one. Not when the truth was already spreading. The revelation. After the session ended, people began whispering in clusters. Some left early. His boss approached him, whispering something that made his face pale. And then, Claire appeared. She had been standing at the back the whole time. Her eyes were wide, hurt, confused. She had seen everything. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away and walked out. Right there, in front of everyone. The room was chaos. Reporters murmured, cameras clicked. And Daniel, the man who once thought he was untouchable, stood alone, his mask shattered. I stayed seated, watching it unfold. No satisfaction, no smile, just quiet understanding. This wasn't vengeance anymore. It was truth finally catching up. The confrontation later, as people began leaving, he spotted me. For a moment his eyes widened. Shock, disbelief, guilt, all at once. He walked over quickly, his voice low and shaky. "Why are you here?" he demanded. I looked up at him calmly. "Listening. Learning. You always did have a lot to teach about integrity." He clenched his jaw. "You think this is funny?" "No," I said softly. "I think it's fair." He looked around, desperate. "Did you do this?" I tilted my head. "I didn't say a word, Daniel. The truth speaks for itself." His breath came shallow. "You don't understand. This could ruin me." I met his eyes, steady and cold. "You ruined yourself the day you chose deceit over decency." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. And for the first time ever, Daniel Carter, the man who always had something to say, stood speechless. By the following week, everything unraveled for him. The company launched an internal review. Rumors turned into evidence, and soon his personal misconduct became public knowledge. He lost his position, his credibility, and the respect of everyone who once admired him. I didn't post, I didn't gloat. I just watched quietly, like someone watching the last embers of a fire that had burned too long. He tried to reach out again. Calls, messages, apologies. I didn't answer, because forgiveness doesn't mean reopening the door to those who wrecked your peace. And strangely, I didn't feel angry anymore. What I felt was closure. Not because he suffered, but because I finally didn't care. Weeks later, I passed by the same riverside cafe, the one where I'd first seen him with her. The air smelled of rain again, just like that day. I sat by the window sipping my coffee, calm and free. I saw him outside walking alone. He looked thinner, older, humbled. Our eyes met for a moment. No words, no gestures, just silence. He looked away first, and that's when I realized something powerful. I didn't need revenge to win. All I needed was to heal, because the greatest punishment for someone like him is having to watch you become everything they lost. As I stood to leave, I walked past him, close enough for him to hear me whisper. "Funny thing about lies," I said softly. "They always find their way home." He looked up, speechless, again, and I walked away, not in triumph, but in peace, because the day of reckoning had come and gone. And it wasn't loud or chaotic. It was quiet, elegant, inevitable, just like the truth itself. I stepped outside into the soft drizzle, the sky painted in silver. The storm that once destroyed me had cleared, and now in its place was calm. I smiled. Not because I'd won, but because I'd survived. And survival, I realized, is the sweetest revenge of all. As I walked away, a single thought echoed in my mind, steady and certain. He was right about one thing. Integrity does define who we are. He just learned it the hardest way possible. It's strange how silence feels different after a storm. Before, it used to haunt me. Every quiet night was filled with questions. Every still moment replayed memories I didn't want to see. But now, silence feels like peace, like breathing after drowning. Months have passed since that day, the day Daniel's mask finally cracked under the weight of his own lies. At first, I didn't know what to feel. Relief, triumph, sadness? Maybe all of them, tangled together in a way I couldn't explain. But one morning, I woke up, looked at my reflection, and realized something simple. I was finally free. I used to wake up dreading the day ahead, checking my phone for messages that never came, wondering where he was, who he was with, what lie I'd be told next. Now, I wake up early, make coffee, and open the curtains to let the light in. No anxiety, no pretending, just me. The apartment feels different too. For months, it had been filled with ghosts, memories of laughter, dinners, and whispered promises that meant nothing. But little by little, I reclaimed every corner. I threw away the old photos, painted the walls a brighter color, bought a plant that I somehow managed to keep alive. Something I used to joke I could never do. It's funny how healing works. It doesn't come all at once like lightning. It's slow, steady, like sunlight creeping into a dark room. When people talk about moving on, they make it sound simple, like closing a book and picking up another. But it's not. Moving on is rewriting the story while you're still in it. I had to learn who I was without him. For years, my identity was tied to us. Every decision, every dream, every plan somehow revolved around him. When he was gone, I felt like I had nothing left. But slowly I realized I was never empty. I was just buried. I started taking long walks again, the kind I used to love before life got complicated. Sometimes I'd stop at the same cafe by the river. Not to remember, but to remind myself how far I'd come. I went back to painting, something I hadn't done since college. The first stroke on the canvas felt like exhaling for the first time in years. Colors that once reminded me of pain, reds, grays, deep blues, became symbols of strength and rebirth. I even started a new project at work, something I'd always been too scared to lead before. Fear used to hold me back. Now it fuels me, because once you've survived heartbreak, deadlines and meetings don't scare you anymore. A few months after everything, I saw Daniel again. Not on purpose. Life just has a cruel sense of humor sometimes. It was at a bookstore downtown. He was standing in the self-help section of all places, flipping through a book about rebuilding your life. For a moment, I almost laughed. He didn't notice me at first, but when he did, his expression froze, like he'd seen a ghost. For me, though, it was just another Tuesday. He walked over slowly, awkwardly. "Hey," he said softly, almost afraid of his own voice. "Hi," I replied, calm, steady. There was a long silence between us, the kind that used to feel unbearable. Now it just felt empty. "I heard you've been doing well," he said finally. "I'm glad," I nodded. "I am. Really well." He looked down at his hands. I never meant for things to end that way. I studied his face, the same one I'd once memorized every inch of. He looked older, tired, worn down by the weight of his own mistakes. "I believe you," I said quietly, "but meaning and doing aren't the same thing." He nodded, eyes glistening. "You deserved better." "I know," I said with a small smile. "And now I have it." He opened his mouth to say something else, but I'd already turned away. Not out of anger, but because the conversation was already over, long before it began. And as I walked out of that bookstore, I realized something I never thought I'd feel toward him again. Forgiveness. Not the kind that excuses what he did, but the kind that frees me from ever needing an apology. Betrayal has a strange way of teaching you about yourself. It strips you bare, forces you to confront your weakest parts, your need for approval, your fear of being alone, your tendency to give too much. I used to think revenge was power. Now I know that real power is peace, the kind that can't be shaken by someone else's actions. I stopped asking why he did what he did, because sometimes the answers don't matter. What matters is what you do after. I chose to heal, to rebuild, to let go of the story that kept me stuck in the same chapter. People often ask me if I'd ever fall in love again. And my answer is simple, yes, but differently. Next time I won't love blindly. I'll love with awareness, with boundaries, with self-respect, because trust isn't about closing your eyes and hoping. It's about keeping them open and choosing anyway. One evening, I sat by the river again, the same one that had witnessed every version of me. The broken one, the angry one, the healing one, and now, the whole one. The sky was painted in gold and pink, the water calm, reflecting everything without distortion. For the first time in a long time, I felt aligned with that reflection, clear, steady, at peace. I realized then that my story wasn't about him. It never was. It was about me, my resilience, my rediscovery, my rise from the ashes. He was just the storm, but I was the sky that cleared after it. Sometimes, late at night, I still write letters I'll never send. They start with "Dear Daniel" and end with "Goodbye," but they're not angry anymore. They're filled with gratitude. Strange, unexpected gratitude. Because if he hadn't broken me, I'd never have learned how to rebuild. If he hadn't lied, I'd never have learned how to trust myself. If he hadn't walked away, I might never have found my own path. I write those letters not for him, but for me, to remind myself that pain can be a teacher. Too, these days, peace doesn't mean quiet. It means balance. It means knowing that chaos can come and go, but I'll still be standing when it passes. It means understanding that closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you create for yourself. I used to think I needed revenge to move on, but what I really needed was forgiveness. Not for him, but for me. To forgive myself for staying too long, for ignoring the red flags, for loving someone who didn't know how to love back. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see strength. Not the loud, angry kind, the quiet, steady kind that doesn't need to prove anything. The kind that comes from surviving what was meant to break you. Sometimes when I tell this story, people ask, "Do you ever miss him?" And I tell them the truth. No, I don't miss him, but I miss who I was before he betrayed me, the girl who believed in forever. Then I smile, because I realize she's not gone. She's just wiser now, more grounded, more whole. Pain changes you, yes, but it also introduces you to parts of yourself you didn't know existed: strength, resilience, grace, and maybe that's the real purpose of heartbreak, to lead you back to yourselves. I walk home under the soft glow of the streetlights, I pass by couples laughing, holding hands. And instead of bitterness, I feel warmth. Because love, in its truest form, still exists. It just needs to begin with yourself first. I take a deep breath, look up at the night sky, and whisper, "Thank you for everything, even the pain. Because the storm didn't destroy me. It shaped me. And in the quiet aftermath, I found something more powerful than revenge or closure. I found peace. Pure, steady, unshakable peace. And for the first time in a long, long time, that's all I ever needed. If you've made it this far, you probably know how the story ends. But the truth is, it doesn't really end. Not when someone betrays you that deeply. It doesn't close like a book, it just transforms. You stop waiting for answers. You stop wishing for an apology. And one day, you wake up realizing the story that once broke you has quietly turned into the one that built you. If you're listening to this, maybe you've been where I was. Maybe you've trusted someone who lied to you. Maybe you've looked into someone's eyes and seen love, only to later realize it was just a reflection of your own hope. And maybe, like me, you've spent nights asking why. Why they did it. Why you didn't see it coming. Why it had to hurt so much. I won't pretend I have all the answers. But I can tell you this, pain changes you. Not always in ways you expect, and rarely in ways you want. But sometimes, that change is the very thing that saves you. For a long time, I thought revenge was about getting even, about making them feel what they made me feel. But now, looking back, I realize that was never the point. The real revenge? It's peace. It's smiling again when they thought you never would. It's living your life so fully. They become just a chapter, not the whole book. When Daniel betrayed me, I thought I'd never recover. I thought he'd taken something from me that I could never get back. Trust, innocence, the ability to believe in love again. But what I didn't see then was that life has a way of rebuilding you stronger in the places you were once broken. I learned that love, at its core, isn't about losing yourself in someone else. It's about sharing your life, not surrendering it. And if someone makes you feel small in order to feel big themselves, that's not love. That's control disguised as affection. I used to think forgiving him would mean letting him off the hook. But forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of their mistakes. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It means accepting that the past happened and choosing not to live there anymore. There's a certain power in walking away, quietly, with dignity, without needing to prove a point. The old me would have screamed, argued, demanded to be understood. But now I know, silence speaks louder than anger ever could. You see, when someone betrays you, they expect chaos. They expect you to break. So when you stand tall, calm, unshaken, that's the moment you reclaim your power, and that's the real victory. Not seeing them fall, but knowing you rose. Betrayal isn't just about someone lying to you. It's about what it reveals within you. It forces you to see the parts of yourself that were too forgiving, too hopeful, too patient with people who didn't deserve it. It hurts because it confronts you with the truth that sometimes love isn't enough to save something that was already broken. But it also teaches you resilience. It shows you how strong you can be when you have no choice but to rebuild. And most of all, it teaches you that you don't need closure from them. Because closure is what you give yourself when you finally stop waiting. If you're still in that place, the sleepless nights, the unanswered questions, the constant what ifs, please hear me when I say this. You will not feel like this forever. The pain will fade, slowly, maybe even painfully slow, but it will. And when it does, you'll look back and realize that this heartbreak didn't destroy you. It revealed you. You'll stop remembering the sound of their voice and start hearing your own again. You'll stop waiting for their apology and start giving yourself permission to heal. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll smile again. Not because you forgot, but because you forgave. That's how healing works. It doesn't erase the past. It just removes its power over you. You know, when I first thought about getting revenge, I imagined exposing him, embarrassing him, making him regret what he did. But with time, I learned that revenge doesn't have to be destructive. It can be transformative. Revenge can be choosing to rise. choosing to rebuild yourself into someone stronger than they ever expected. It's walking into your future with grace, not bitterness. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about hurting someone back. It's about showing them you survived without them, that you found happiness again, and they no longer have any power over your emotions. That's the kind of revenge that lasts. What surprised me most was how my story started to help others. When I finally shared what happened, not as gossip, not as drama, but as truth, people reached out. Friends, even strangers, saying, "I've been there too." And suddenly, my pain wasn't just mine anymore. It became something that connected me to others, something that reminded us all that betrayal doesn't define us. How we rise from it does. It taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's courage. It's saying, "This hurt me, but I'm still here." And every time someone told me my story gave them hope, I realized something powerful. Maybe that was the real reason it all happened. Maybe it wasn't just about what I lost, but about what I could give. Now, when I think of love, I don't think of promises or grand gestures. I think of honesty, consistency, peace. I've learned that love shouldn't feel like walking on eggshells. It shouldn't make you question your worth. Love is supposed to be a safe place, not a battlefield. And if it isn't safe, if it makes you doubt yourself or silence your own voice just to keep someone else, then it's not love. It's fear wearing a mask. Trust, too, has a new meaning for me now. It's not about believing someone blindly. It's about observing who they are when no one's watching. It's about actions that match words. Because words are easy, but consistency is rare. If you'd told me back then that I'd ever thank Daniel for what he did, I would have laughed in your face. But now, I understand. Because of him, I learned what betrayal feels like. And I also learned what self-respect feels like. Because of him, I discovered how powerful forgiveness can be. And because of him, I realized that I never needed anyone else to complete me. I was already whole. He was just the lesson I needed to find that out. I no longer see myself as a victim of betrayal. I see myself as the author of my own comeback. And the most beautiful part? I didn't have to lose my heart to heal. I just had to find it again. So if you're standing in the ashes of something that once meant everything, wondering how to start over, let me tell you this. You already have. The moment you decided you deserved better, you started rebuilding. The moment you stopped chasing answers and started chasing peace, you began healing. You may not feel strong right now, but you are. Every breath, every tear, every small step forward is proof that you're surviving, and that's enough. You don't need to rush the healing. You just need to believe that one day, this pain will make sense. And when it does, you'll look back and say, "That was the moment I changed. That was the moment I rose." If there's one thing I've learned from it all, it's this. Revenge might give you satisfaction, but forgiveness gives you peace. Anger might make you feel powerful, but letting go makes you free. And love, real love, begins the moment you choose yourself. Because at the end of every betrayal, every heartbreak, every storm, there's a version of you waiting on the other side, stronger, wiser, and finally whole. All you have to do is walk toward her, step by step, day by day, until one day you realize you didn't just survive the storm, you became it.